just define kind of what technocracy is. Webster's defines technocracy, you could look it up, as government by technicians. Another subdefinition is management of society by technical experts. We see that definition of the word technocracy frequently enough, I suppose. Technocracy with a capital T from the 1930s is another topic altogether. And essentially what it is, technocracy with a capital T is a replacement economic system based on energy distribution and consumption run by engineers, scientists, and technicians. This was the definition from the 1930s. It is a replacement economic system. And my background is economics, by the way. I think you said that in the beginning. And so anytime somebody in a conversation, in articles, talks about economic systems, I'm interested. It just interests me. So when I caught wind that technocracy was a replacement economic system, my antennas went up, straight up in the air.
Yeah.
Like, whoa,
Yeah, yeah, they would.
What is this? So technocracy, according to a publication in 1938 called The Technocrat, this is what they wrote. This is not the only definition, but it summarizes it pretty well. It wrote, and I quote, "Technocracy is the science of social engineering, the scientific operation of the entire global mechanism to produce and distribute goods and services to the entire population." Those are economic words. Produce and distribute goods and services to the population. Those are economics issues. Those are not political issues. Those are economic words. And so technocracy viewed itself as a replacement system for capitalism. And you can understand this a little bit back in the 1930s. The Great Depression was raging. There were soup lines stretching around blocks, for people, hungry people trying to get something to put in their mouth. There was no employment to be had. People were broke. People were still jumping out of windows from the Great Crash. And capitalism appeared to be dead, John. It really did. Many people thought that it was dead. They blamed the politicians, too. They thought these guys, they've mismanaged, they screwed us so bad that capitalism has been killed, and whether it was intentional or not was immaterial. But capitalism was viewed as being dead. So when technocracy said, well, we have an answer, folks. We have a replacement economic system that will solve everybody's problem. It was pretty well accepted back then. Well, it originated in earnest at Columbia University in 1932. That's a strange place for something like this to pop up, but they wheedled their way into Columbia. Several of the leading engineers and scientists at Columbia embraced technocracy, hook, line, and sinker. It was founded by two gentlemen. M. King Hubbard, number one, is a brilliant young geophysicist, and a guy by the name of Howard Scott, who it turns out later was nothing more than a promoter. He wasn't even an engineer. But they founded this organization in 1933 at Columbia. And Howard Scott, when it was discovered he didn't even have a degree in engineering, Columbia got really upset. They realized they'd been scammed, and they drop-kicked Scott, King, and the entire technocracy group out of Columbia.
They kicked them. I like that.
They punted them right out into the street. They wanted nothing to do with them.
Ow.
The two of them went off and they incorporated the name Technocracy, and they call it Technocracy Inc. And they did it in early 1934. And then they proceeded to write what was called the Technocracy Study Course in 1934. That work is on the internet. It's scanned. Somebody scanned it. It's out there, and you can Google it or however you search, find it, Technocracy Study Course, and you can read it for yourself and see if I've lifted any of these quotes correctly. Some sharp person in the audience is going to think, I've heard that name M. King Hubbard before. Where have I heard his name? Well, Hubbard was the guy that in 1954, which was 20 years later, invented the so-called peak oil theory that has now become instrumental in the eco movement all over the world.
You mean that term actually originated that long ago?
Yes, it did. And it was M. King Hubbard specifically that developed that theory. That was his theory. In fact, many people used to call it Hubbard's theory. Now it's called peak oil theory. And so he is now hailed as one of the fathers of the eco movement globally. Well, this is the same M. King Hubbard that founded technocracy back in 1933 or 34. Okay, it's important to see the law. This history is just laid out there. You know, it's like, and history tends to repeat itself. You can't understand the present unless you understand how we got here, from, you know, where it came from. So you see, back in those days, the technocracy movement was huge. They had hundreds of thousands of people across America and in Canada who were card-carrying members of Technocracy Inc. And I show this picture of the Hollywood Bowl back in probably 1935, 36, somewhere like that. The Hollywood Bowl was still, the landscape hadn't grown up yet. It was that new. But the Hollywood Bowl is a big facility. And I don't know how many thousands of people that it holds, but I found this picture where the Hollywood Bowl is full of people coming to hear about technocracy and a technocracy rally. And it was an amazing event. I wish I could find more about it. But, you know, I published these pictures for people to see because if they didn't see them, they would think, oh, come on, you know, that there was no group called Technocracy Inc. I say, what do you call a Hollywood Bowl here full of all these people? And when you look up on the stage where all the technocrats, the members, you know, the leaders were standing, you see them all standing in a row, and they all have on gray uniforms, like suits, a business suit, you know, like the double-breasted gray with a blue tie. They all have the little insignia pin for technocracy, which was the monad symbol. That's the yin-yang symbol. It's kind of an occultic symbol, but it means balance. And that fit technocracy. They wanted to balance everything with their scientific method. So they're all wearing these gray suits, and the women are wearing gray skirts and coats. And you think, that's strange. Why are they all dressed up like in kind of like uniforms? And have I ever seen something like that before? Well, the director of operations for technocracy was a man by the name of William Knight, Knight. He worked for he was an aeronautical engineer, and he worked for a company, an aircraft company, that was tightly associated with an aircraft country in Nazi Germany. It was a subsidiary, actually. And he was very favorable to the Nazi cause in Germany, which was just rising up in 1933. And he suggested that Technocracy Inc. needed to have a paramilitary look. So he said, why don't we adopt a dress code, and let's all dress the same way? And so they did. And so they developed a salute too. You know, they had this special, well, it wasn't a three-finger salute, but, you know, they had this special wave that they did to each other when they greeted each other. And, you know, it was the strangest thing you ever saw. And one of the reasons, by the way, that this is important, in Canada, Technocracy Inc. was actually outlawed for 2 years for being a subversive organization. I think they misread it, maybe. The government up there might have misread Technocracy when they outlawed them. Maybe not, though. There's another book on that for me at some point, probably.
Yeah.
But there was a definite influence from Nazi Germany on the Technocracy movement, at least visually, okay? And when Hitler really rose to power, a lot of Americans got nervous just about that appearance, you know, the appearance is the same, because these people tended to look like the SS. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, you know, they didn't quite grasp it. And I don't know that I'm not saying there was a direct connection, but it was very suspicious in any case. And here they are in their little uniforms. You see them all over. They even had automobiles. They convinced General Motors to develop a paint called Technocracy Gray.
Really?
You could order cars, and many people did. They ordered cars that were painted with Technocracy Gray. They had buses too that they bought that had technocracy gray.
Technocracy gray.
Yeah, that's really yeah,
That's
and
very interesting.
that's not to be confused with 50 Shades of Gray, believe me. But it was just the weirdest appearing thing you ever saw in your life. So, some highlights on technocracy, just as we get into it. By nature, technocracy produces volumes of inviolable regulations that are science-based. That's number one. These people write regulations like you've never seen. And number two, it does in the end create totalitarian control, but I stress to mention it is not socialism and it is not communism. I'll explain that in just a second why I say that.
Excellent.
It seeks to replace price-based economic system with an energy-based economic system.
Oh, yes. Energy credits, it says here.
Energy currency, energy credits. I've written about this now for about 6 years, but I'll tell you, it's all over the news today. It's
Should you change that to carbon credits at some point?
You can substitute energy for carbon in this discussion anyway, all the way through. They changed the word to carbon. It was originally energy, but carbon means energy, and they know it. They say it. So, but here's the reason that socialism and communism are not in view here. Both socialism and communism and Marxism as well, and fascism, they're all based on a price-based economy. Communism merely suggests that only the government can manage the economy. That's what they said, but it's still a price-based economy. Scarcity, of course, is an issue in communism, but you still buy things with currency, with money. And the government manages the economy. Well, it's the same thing with socialism, the redistribution of wealth. Well, what's wealth? Well, wealth is money. It's currency. It's the green dollar bills. It's the Swiss francs. It's the euros. It's whatever, the Chinese yuans. And so when you have an energy-based system that is going to replace money with energy credits or an energy currency, all of a sudden, all of the economic models that we know about price-based economics goes out the door. They do not apply. And we'll see how crazy this is in just a minute.
Excellent.
So just to introduce their concept from the Technocracy Study Course, this was written in 1934. You got to hand it to engineers. They're good about documenting stuff. They're very good at that. You give an engineer a project, he gets out his ruler, he gets out his quadrille paper, his pencil, and he starts writing down requirements, and he's writing down notes and stuff on how we're going to, how can we engineer this project to make it work. They did that back in those days. They had 7 principal requirements to make technocracy happen. I'm going to read you the first 5. They're the important ones.
All right.
The first requirement, and this is a direct quote, register on a continuous 24-hour per day basis the total net conversion of energy. I'll just let that sink just a minute here.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, quote, by means of the registration of energy converted and consumed, make possible a balanced load. Parenthetical comment, isn't this exactly what you hear your utilities talking about?
Almost every day.
Balanced load, registration of energy converted and consumed. Okay. Number 3, quote, provide a continuous inventory of all production and consumption. Number 4, quote, provide a specific registration of the type, kind, etc. of all goods and services where produced and where used. Parenthetical statement now. Think about all of the data mining of your financial records and transactions that are going on seemingly by everybody in the corporate world and the government as well. Number 5, quote, provide specific registration of the consumption of each individual plus a record and description of the individual. Close quote. Those were the first 5 requirements of technocracy, for which they did not have the technology in those days to accomplish. but they do today. And this is exactly what we see happening today. These 5 requirements